Right, and we're live. We're live. Welcome back, everybody, to the E-Tourism Summit See Tomorrow series. It's an exciting time in the travel and tourism industry, and really looking forward to a great conversation today, and really looking forward to continuing to build on these conversations over the course of the year as we lead up to the E-Tourism Summit live and in person in September. Co-located with U.S. Travel Association at IPW, which is going to is really creating a ton of incredible momentum. So we're thrilled about that. I'm really excited for today's conversation for a couple of reasons. I think the topic on data driving strategy is incredibly important right now and important to all of our DMO marketing partners. I'm also excited to have a new eTourism Summit sponsor on board with Advanced Travel and Tourism. And again, the fact that you all have stepped up and joined the eTourism Summit community, I just, Joseph, want to say thank you to you and your team for stepping up, and we're very much looking forward to working with you. And also Key Data, another new partner with the eTourism Summit. And again, thrilled to have you both here. So along with our amazing guests and good friend Rob and Dan and Jackie. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Joseph, and really, again, thank you all for taking the time today to help our industry move forward as we think about the future of tourism marketing and the role that data and strategy plays in that. So thank you all. Joseph, thanks for sponsoring this, and I'll hand it off to you.
Great. Thanks, Will. I really appreciate it. And, I think it's an exciting time for us. Like we were just talking about it before this call got going, numbers across the tourism industry are exceeding expectations right now. And that's just a fantastic thing for all of us to be experiencing. And I hope that we all stay grounded in where we're coming from out of 2020 as the new opportunities present themselves in 2021. It's an exciting time for us, and I think that we're all going to see great growth and continued evolution of our industry. I know a lot of things changed last year, and I think that we've learned a lot from that. We became more resilient. We became a better marketing organizations and service providers to those organizations. So it's an exciting time for us, and I'm real excited about today's conversation. If you don't mind, I'm going to take just a few minutes to go through the panel and let them introduce themselves, where they're from, what destination they represent, or company that they represent. Certainly, what they do at their organization, and just for something fun, what's your favorite place to vacation? So if that's cool, Dan, I'm going to start with you. Why don't you tell the crew where you're from, who you represent, and what your favorite destination is to visit?
Hi, it's good to see everybody, and a couple of shout outs, to Julie Heiser with the Department of Commerce. She is a dear friend and has been very helpful to me in the past. I've been in Panama City Beach for 13 and a half years, and we have been through, other than wildfires, just about every kind of challenge that you could imagine in a destination. So we've done crises and we've done them often, but the Department of Commerce came down, 10 years ago and really helped us out as we were going through the recovery. So Julie gets a special shout out for all the work that they did with us after our first crisis. Previous to this, I was with the travel director in the state of Georgia. I've been in the advocacy side of the world. I've also grew up in the resort business. And so tourism is part of my DNA. My dad was in the National Park Service. So, I've done this since birth. My favorite place to be is in the Rocky Mountains, either New Mexico, where I'm from, or Colorado, where I spent a lot of my formative years. So I'm a Westerner by birth and philosophy, and I'm a Floridian by geography. But it's a great place to be, and this is an industry that I wouldn't trade for anything.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate you sharing. I know that I love Panama City Beach. Been going there since I was a little bitty boy, and have been through some of those crisis hurricanes with you. I was born and raised in South Mississippi, so very familiar with those ugly storms. Glad to see that you're in a resilient DMO. There's no doubt Panama City stands above a lot when it comes to being able to bounce back after tough times like that. Rob, what about yourself, man?
Hey, Rob Wells. I'm with Visit Beaufort, Port Royal, and the Sea Islands here in Beaufort, South Carolina. Shout out to all, since Dan's doing shout outs, might as well shout out the South Carolinian DMO folks that are on the call joining us today. Say hey to them. The state's rocking and rolling. We're seeing some great numbers here in our neck of the woods here in the Low Country. Listen, if you're not familiar with Beaufort, we're located just between Charleston and Savannah and Hilton Head. So not only do we have great landscape, but we have tremendous neighbors in the tourism world, and some of the best partners we could hope for in drawing visitors to our area. Before the tourism world, I taught school. I sold CPAP machines, but nothing has been rewarding over the last 16 years as working and serving in the tourism industry. This past year has been just another feather in the cap as far as challenges and being able to raise above those. And you know what? Been thanking all of our partners who came alongside of us early and often, and made that the return seem better and well positioned. Well, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about today. As far as favorite places, Joseph, I do like Florida. I mean, it's a great place to go. There's great things, but I'm gonna go Flat Rock, North Carolina. Another small town in the mountains of a beautiful state of North Carolina. A lot of great memories. Carl Sandburg National Park, his home's there. Hubba Hubba Barbecue. I can go on and on, but if you haven't put that on your little small town bucket list, there's a shout out for them.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Rob. I mean, anytime you got good barbecue, I'm game for a visit. Daniel, why don't we go to you, man? Tell us a little bit about who you're representing and what's your favorite place to visit.
For sure. I'm Daniel Liefeld. I'm with Key Data Dashboard. I'm the director of data sales here. I spent about 10 years in the vacation rental industry before coming to Key Data, working for an online marketing agency that specialized in vacation rentals. So pretty astute in the vacation rental world. But since coming to Key Data, we've been working with a lot of different partners from all over the country. So very familiar with many of the places that you're talking about right now. My favorite vacation spot, man, it's hard. I've been to some amazing places with my family. I have 3 kids. I have to say that if I'm going alone for a conference, I like going to Nashville. But if I'm going with my family, I got to say that Alaska was my favorite place to take the family. There's surprisingly way more than I thought to do for a family. The zoos. My kid was 1 when we went there, and she still talks about the animals that she saw when we were there. So pretty impressive to have that type of staying power. So I'm going to say Alaska, and I know that might throw some people off. Don't get offended, please.
Well, I'm a little partial to the Southeast, and Alaska doesn't quite fit into that category, but that's okay. I've heard it's great, and I'm sure it's beautiful.
It's just you can do so much and see so many different things that you can't see in the lower 48. So
yep, awesome. Well, Daniel, thanks for joining us. I'm excited to hear from you today, and I appreciate Key Data being a great partner to us and to eTourism. Jackie, let's go to you real quick. Tell me a little bit about yourself and what's your favorite place to visit?
Yeah, so I'm Jacqueline Blackwell. I'm with Advanced Travel and Tourism. I've been with the company almost 7 years. That's super exciting. I've been in tourism for about that long as well. I have been on the back end of campaigns, on the front end. I really love looking at the data, which I think is why I'm a part of this call. I love all things related to learning and more information. My favorite place to travel was probably the most recent trip I took was out to the Grand Canyon. That was the most breathtaking views I've ever seen in my whole life. Pictures never do it justice. And it was amazing. I took my daughter out there and we rode a helicopter. We're supposed to go on a boat, but the Colorado River was a little low. But we stayed on a ranch. Our sunrise and sunset, we had a view of the Grand Canyon, and it was just amazing. So that has been my favorite vacation spot so far. Although if we're talking about, like, to Daniel's point, business travel, I mean, I can't tell you how many small towns I've fallen in love with, like Blowing Rock, North Carolina is this cute little town. Vicksburg, Mississippi is a growing town. I'll call out Rob. I've really fallen in love with Beaufort too. It's a really fun town with more to offer than people realize. So, and small towns have had an opportunity to thrive more than ever throughout 2020. So that's really cool too.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing. And guys, I'm Joseph Dabbs. I'm the Director of Sales at Advanced Travel. I think my favorite place, so I'm a mountain biker. You can tell I've got bikes all over my room. I'm a mountain biker. So any place that has good trails is my favorite place to visit. I don't need a whole lot to keep me happy. A warm cup of coffee before I ride and a cold cup of beer after I ride. And I'm just about happy no matter where I am. With that being said, I do think probably Brevard, North Carolina is one of my favorite places to go. You've got the Pisgah National Forest, you've got DuPont State Park, and you've got all the good things that I just mentioned. So really excited to get the conversation going. So with that, let's get the party started. Today's discussion, guys, really is better strategy starts with better data. How to become a data-informed tourism organization has always been important and will continue to be important, but that game is shifting and evolving constantly. New things are coming on board, and it's important to keep up with the changing opportunities that are out there. We all know how important data is. That's not a secret. It helps guide us on so many different levels, both personally and professionally. I'm a big cyclist. I watch all kinds of data on my ride metrics and my health metrics to make sure I'm optimizing my cycling experience. And so when you look at it professionally, it's even more of an important part of the equation. It helps with marketing. It helps with growth initiatives. It helps with identifying opportunity and perhaps even guiding us away from, areas we don't want to go get involved in and be part of. Data confirms a lot of these decisions too, guys. It helps us understand, was the outcome what we wanted it to be, what we intended it to be? And that's important because sometimes, as you guys know, marketing is part art, but part strategy. And sometimes we have to make sure that we look at the outcome of the campaign or the strategy that we put in place and make sure the outcome is giving us what we wanted it to. And really, cornerstone is the decision, data is the cornerstone behind most of these decisions. So with that being said, I really want y'all to walk away with three major things today. Understanding what data is and what data sets you guys may have. I think you might uncover some opportunities of data sets that are in your quiver that you didn't even realize were valuable. I want you to really understand how DMOs should analyze that data and what role it should play in the long-term decisions for marketing and strategy. And I also want to talk about key performance indicators that you should be looking at within your data sets to help guide you on those decisions. So let's get that party started. And we're going to start off, Dan, with you today. Dan, this is a little bit of an open-ended question. And Rob, the question's coming right to you afterwards. So be ready. But Dan, in an open-ended question, why does data matter to Panama City Beach? And how do you guys leverage it within your decision process?
It matters on a couple of different levels, and the need for it changes upon the roles within the organization. I mean, we really take a look at a lot of data that is driving targeting. Where do we go out and target our customers and those customers that we want to acquire, and that is critically important. But it's also, data is used in other ways in terms of identifying trends. Sometimes we've learned over the last, 12 months that comparisons to the same time last year are now just completely out the window because all of those things have changed. And so you can't just rely on data in the same way that you've done in the past. You really have to start to dig deeper. And the marketing team looks at it differently than I do. For me, a lot of it is comparative. How are we against other destinations in our competitive set? And how do we, pull all of this together? But one of the most important aspects of data that is so critically important is you have to truth test it. because at some point in time in the destination marketing world, you are going to be in a public forum and you're going to say a statistic and you're going to get challenged, whether it's by a constituent, it's a stakeholder, it's a board member, somebody's going to, call it. And if you haven't really ground it to understand it completely, then all of a sudden, the embarrassment factor goes up and then the integrity factor, declines. And so people stop listening. And so every time we pull in a new partner, I mean, it's painful, as Daniel will attest, because when we started working, with key data, I would challenge a lot of how they were, presenting the data just to make sure that I knew and we knew that it was accurate. And we've done that with a lot of other partners that we use. And it really refines, the information and the targeting. So when we're using it, that we understand it completely and that it does achieve the desired results.
Rob?
Yeah. So, I mean, Dan is so right about that last part, that trust factor that comes into the data that we receive, because we receive so much data right now. Data is important for our destination, and we're a much smaller destination on this particular call. And there's a majority of us out there who have in the past relied on either our gut, or some board member has a hot lead or a good way of doing it, or they've seen this thing in the past. And so one way to combat that, or to be able to draw down, give us a better beacon to point towards, was data. I compare it to this. My dad is one of the greatest direction givers of all time. Go up to the street, hang a left by Kelsey's Creek, go by the creek, you'll go by the store, go to the other. Well, that type of direction was informative if you only know where those places are located, the store, the creek, the stick. What data does is it allows it to be an actual GPS machine for us, point us in the right direction, validate that those landmarks are there, validate that the information is coming back. I mean, that's so important for a smaller DMO who's trying to transform into to be in a destination that can draw different folks into the area, and it points us in the right direction for them. And as you said, that's so key for us moving forward, especially in it coming, into the pandemic, looking at the data of what they're doing, and then making the plans going forward. It wasn't like we had a whole lot of money to pour into it. And so we wanted to make the best use of the funds, make sure we're following the trends. And that's where the data came in, and is very useful for a destination of our size, for destinations both big and small.
Yep. I mean, great points, both guys. I think what's interesting that y'all said is you both talk about how how you have to really analyze it through a couple different lenses. You can't just look at it from one perspective. Dan, what you mentioned about, getting tested on it by stakeholders or board members, data is great, but if you don't know the definition behind what you're looking at and how it truly impacts you as the destination or the travel organization, it's really no good. So it's all, data is important, but it's how you categorize and then able to use that in an actionable way. Jackie, I know you come from a different angle. So you're coming from it from a media perspective, or you're coming from it from an agency perspective. What kind of, when you're building out recommendations for campaign design, what data sets do you look at, and which do you find the most valuable?
Yeah, so a lot of what we'll do is within analytics, but we'll also take other data sets that a client might have or a partner might have, like something from key data or an occupancy report, to see different things like that, seasonality. But if we're talking just about analytics or even a database, we're looking at what markets people are coming from, but not just the site as a whole. We might drill down to what markets are people coming from when they're going to your hotels pages or your lodging pages versus your events page. Sometimes those might be a little bit different. Who's going to your B&B pages versus your hotel or your vacation rentals? Sometimes those markets might differ. So little drill downs like that in analytics can help you build, where that audience is and then who they might be, because you can even drill that down to age groups. You might see that you have probably pretty common an older age group going to your B&Bs, and families looking at your vacation rentals from certain markets. So that can help identify some ideal markets to go after, but then you can align that with, maybe your DMO has done a research study. And so you're saying, this amount of people are coming from these markets. So you kind of compare those two and see which ones have similarities in markets. And that can help you identify some of your best prospects. Another thing that we did in 2020 is we looked at the traffic coming in and the people that were visiting during the high points of the pandemic. So talking about the shutdown times for like March, April, and early into May, because those were your low hanging fruits. And those were going to be the people that were going to travel first to your destination, who were looking at it when they couldn't go anywhere. So it's little things like that that you can identify while building out a strategy or a campaign just from analytics. Along with combining it with other data sets too.
Jackie, what other data sets? So you mentioned analytics, you mentioned databases like your owned and operated database. Are there any other forms of databases that you look at when you're working through, a whiteboard?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really endless, right? The information that you're able to get is endless, whether it's those. One thing we did with Rob was launch, and this is kind of a live environment type of data set to get an idea of what are people thinking right now in this moment as it relates to travel. So one thing we implemented were poll ads and social. So we were pushing out a video and we were asking those users, are you traveling in 2 to 3 months or 4 to 5 months? Are you traveling in the fall or in the spring? Do you prefer a vacation rental or a historic inn? And so those were things we could take like another form of data and help us decide what our next messaging would be. And we also had that fragmented by audiences too. So when you're reaching one audience with, 3 different audiences with the same messaging, you get different results. So we were also watching that to see what is that audience, what's resonating with that audience versus the next one. So we knew what to go for after that.
Rob, did you want to add something to that?
Well, no, I mean, it's been helpful for us in doing the poll ads, and I'll speak to that just a little bit, just from the sense of give us a little bit more insight on what creative may be pulling people's attention. I know we saw that through some recent stuff in which certain ads work and perform better. And even the way the polling worked, as far as whether it's a beach house or a historic inn, it allowed us to frame the way we spoke to people, the way we talked about things. We started shaping the way we do our podcast and making sure it fits into the same categories that people are looking for and interested in travel. However, we're keeping our content as fresh as possible and using data to justify those answers. I wanted to say earlier that, in the DMO space, we're probably, in a lot of ways, it's easy to like. People like us and people listen to people that they like, but they'll do business with people they trust. And data allows us to establish that trust factor with both our elected officials, with our stakeholders, and within our own team. And so those decision-making processes are so rooted in data. And that's why like folder ads or in some of our new lead generation campaigns, it's so important to have the data and the information ahead of us so we can make the right decision.
Absolutely. Thanks for sharing. Daniel, from Key Data's perspective, obviously you guys have some really killer, valuable data. And I know y'all kind of organize it in several different ways through dashboards. What are some of the key data dashboards that you like and that you find the most value in and that helps you really guide some of those decisions with your partners?
I think the biggest thing, we argue about this all the time internally, which one's our favorite, but I think that comes from our backgrounds, right? And my background in the marketing side of things, really 100%, I would lead off with this every time, is our guest origination for the future. That's the single thing that we provide that I think no one else can provide it. And so that's the thing that makes it's special to me. But, just to touch on a couple of these points that Dan and Rob made about, the validity of the data and being able to go in and establish trust with your lodging providers, with stakeholders in your area. I actually have a great example of that I was on the phone with a couple of weeks ago with a lodger in Winter Park, Colorado, and I showed him what the occupancy was for that time period, and we were looking at it over the course of a week. And he said, "Have you ever been to Winter Park on July 4th? You can't tell me that the occupancy is that low. It's 100%." And I said, "Well, but when you break down the data by the week, it might be 100% on July 4th, but it's 20% the rest of the week, and that makes your total occupancy for the week fall down tremendously." And being able to have that data backed up by real time considerations is something that really established trust with that particular lodger, because I was able to show him the data by day, and yeah, you can see July 4th, it's at 100%, or it was like 95% or something like that. And then all of a sudden the rest of the week, you could see how it dipped down, and that it added that validity. And so being able to see those details, I think really helps everybody encourage that accuracy in a market, and stakeholders can really see how detailed you can get, and that you're really battling for them to try to help them out. So I think those are all things that can really benefit everyone.
Sorry, I was on mute. And I think that's a key thing. And that's one of the key elements I really want to impress through this whole conversation is it's not just looking at one data set or one key thing within a data set. It's leveraging multiple views of different data sets and making collective decisions off of those pieces when you look at them collectively versus individually. Dan, I want to jump back to you for a second. You mentioned in the very first thing that you said was not power of knowledge within data helps you have conversations with your stakeholders. So I wanted to ask, it's a two-part question, and Rob, it's coming to you next. What is the primary data set that PCB looks at from a importance perspective, and how do you use that information to guide those conversations with your stakeholders?
I'm going to digress just twice. First is, happy National Tourism Week to all of us. This is the time of year that we focus on the importance of this industry as an economic development driver. And in these times, I think that's important to say. The second digression is going back to what Jackie brought up about the polling. One of the most important aspects of that is engagement, because as we have been in a time when people couldn't travel, a lot of destinations went completely dark. But one of the things that we were focused on was staying in touch with our core consumers, the people, our brand ambassadors, those that love us. And, there's a lot of strategies to go out and, to keep them engaged. But the polling that has developed online on social media has really helped drive that much higher. And so that engagement really does say that people are focused on the messaging, and we're able to A/B test a lot. So that's the digression. Now back to the question. We look at Key Data Dashboard is probably the tool that I go to personally most often. And what it does is it does track condo vacation rental revenues and occupancy, both historically and then on a go-forward basis, as well as almost real-time reservations activity. And then we're able to go back and to compare that to same time last year, same time 2 years ago, as well as, what the year-end information was. And that's critically important to me, because in the role that I have, it is more speaking to others versus making the individual marketing decisions, trying to figure out how do we use, the information we get from Adara, how do we use the information we get from other sources to make those marketing decisions. From my standpoint, it's all about how do we talk about how we're doing as a destination. And so key data is one of the, my key go-tos. And then we're also partnering with Entrada Zartico to really aggregate a lot of that data into dashboards that I can easily consume. So I'm able to look at Google Analytics. I'm able to look at our Facebook, the organic media that we have in very fast and quick methods, because that's the information that I need to be able to do what I do. Jana Leach, our Vice President of Marketing, she does a much deeper dive into all of those silos just to make sure that we're targeting people well and that we're focused on both who's been here before, who's coming next, and who's going to our competitors, and how do we go talk to them in ways that are meaningful.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, to your point about the engagement elements. We always approach our campaign design in a phase that includes a planning or engagement phase of the traveler process as they make decisions. And one thing that we saw, Dan, to your point, when those months of closure were happening, people were still dreaming and wanting to engage with brands that they knew and they loved. And by putting out a channel for them to quickly engage, not a survey, not a 15-minute poll, but a quick engagement element of media, you saw tremendous vision on what people were looking for and were willing to engage with, which helped drive so many marketing decisions then and still continue to drive them now.
Well, and I think there's another component to it that, up until the pandemic, over tourism, in the baggage that tourism brings was a big topic of conversation. And as we got into the pandemic and people were afraid to travel, destination marketing organizations were stuck, because our job is, to bring people into the market, but our local residents didn't want people to come into the market. But by having those effective communications of being able to tell people, you can't come now, and when you do come in the future, we want you to be safe. And then to that engagement from our customers also allowed us to have that same conversation to our local residents. So they were able to check us in time to make sure that we weren't just a bunch of capitalist pigs that really didn't care about the local community, that we're one in the same. And so that we're able, to get people all together on that strategy. So when visitors came, that it wasn't, we hate you, go home. And we did feel that as things were starting to shut down, but as we reopened, because we focused on that conversation and using the data about engagement to know that our brand ambassadors were supportive of the messaging. And we were also able to look at the data from our local residents, and their comments to say, okay, we're on the right path.
Yeah, it's so smart to take that local residential sentiment into consideration as we open things back up. It's important because if they're not behind the message that you're putting out, Dan, you're exactly right. The visitor may have a not so great experience when they come in. Rob, let's jump to you. So primary data source that helps guide decisions, and how do you use that information to inform your stakeholders?
So for us, it's we look at website traffic just from how our engagement is taking place and how people are coming to the market to look for information. That's probably our most looked at information or data set. We also work within our booking engine to identify, kind of real time what's happening with people, where are they moving about the website, and where the partner referral is going most likely. So we get an idea of the type of traveler that's coming to the marketplace. It's important for us to have the data in my shoes, because it may be making the marketing decision or the direction change that we're heading, and working with our partners to make sure we're making the correct choice in that matter, but also in those conversations with local leadership. I'll give you for instance, we had a conversation with the city finance people. They were looking at one mechanism and saying, wow, hotels are doing very well. Look at, we had business license were up. That's not what the data was indicating. You may have been looking at 3 hotels, but you were missing about 3,000 rooms in the whole marketplace that were or absent of visitors, and be able to have that and be able to pull the data and share that data with them was very helpful, still currently helpful. And then it also allows us to interact with our stakeholders. It removes a lot of the emotion from it. We can get down to just having real data allows us to move the emotion to the side and make informed decisions, be able to make the adjustments that they need to make. You know, my favorite piece of information that we've shared very recently was the image, and Jackie was sharing it there with our polling. We realized that front porches were working a lot better than the beach in the water scenes. And that was interesting because if you'd have asked me, I'd have put every bit of my money on the water, because that's my draw, right? But it performed better. And so we passed that nugget to our stakeholders in an update, and we're starting to see, you know, them grab hold because they trust our data and our response to that. And so it's affecting how our ads look and how they perform. I think we're getting better engagement. If not, we need to probably look at how that goes further. But you know, data is still important and for different reasons. And if you're, no matter if you're a large DMO or small DMO, how you use the data is important. How you talk about the data is important, and making sure that it's done in a way that people understand what you're talking about, not being pedantic about it, but being very much in a way that comes across, say, hey, this is A and B. That's how it works here.
Well, so I want to stay on that just for a second. It's interesting because you're right, both of you guys, and we intentionally did this, even though that both of you guys are coastal destinations, you're very different in the size of organization that y'all are in. So I wanted to ask, you know, with so many different DMO sizes out there, and this is a couple part question, as all of my questions are, sorry. You know, there's so many different DMO sizes out there. I mean, from our partnership, we work with, you know, partners that have 25 employees to 2 employees. Dan, I want to start, and you mentioned Jana, you know, that's your marketing director. You know, who does really use the data within your organization, and then across all of the different teams that use it, what types of different insights do they bring to you to arm you with all that quality information?
Well, we have, I mean, data, you know, cuts across all of the different, you know, aspects of what we do, from, you know, our marketing decisions to, you know, our winter resident activities, you know, that are run through our visitor center, as well as our sports marketing and sales efforts. And one that is maybe unique to us is that we have a sponsorship, you know, a tourism development arm that, you know, we are doing visitor surveys with our partnership with Young Strategies Group to understand, you know, who are coming to some of our special events and to our new sports park, so that, you know, we can really provide direct feedback on the sponsorship side, so that our sponsors know that partnering with us will also help them achieve their business interests. And those, I mean, everybody uses data in different ways to help achieve their departmental goals. We also do a television program where we're giving information back to, you know, the program underwriters. So we're looking, everybody has their piece of this to understand how they're each achieving their KPIs, which helps us, you know, as a unit, really, you know, push forward and go places that a lot of DMOs, you know, aren't. And that's something that we have to do, because, you know, part of our goal is to demonstrate that Panama City Beach is a dynamic beach destination that's worthy of people paying attention to, because we're out there on that cutting edge, and data drives all of that. But at the end of the day, you know, what comes to me are the strategies. Dan, this is what we're doing. This is how we want to move forward, and this is why. And then that allows us to be able to spin that around and get those products into market.
Absolutely. I mean, Rob, you know, again, you're a very different organization set up than Dan has in PCB in Panama City. I think you just said you are the one who analyzes the majority of the data in your organization. Who else do you work with within your organization that analyzes data, and what insights do they bring to you?
Well, sure. It's a small team. We have 6 in our office, and we kind of split that up. We have our marketing coordinator, Megan. She does a lot of deep dives into the analytics. But for us, we are so reliant on the partners that we choose. So let me help explain a little bit about that. So right before the pandemic, I would say January, we worked with a partner. It's the first time we worked with them, and they were able to not only do a deep dive on the back end of our website, but also work with us in placing some different markets and trying to find out what markets would be exploratory markets. That was a beautiful thing, because as the pandemic came, we had to roll more in-house with a lot of the activity that we were doing. So we needed to be able to develop relationships with partners, already have relationship with partners who could help us on their back end mine the data for us. We don't have the luxury of having someone on staff who just sits around and mines data all day. I wish I did. That'd be awesome. But we have to rely on partners who have those people at their fingertips. Daniel with Key Data has this information that he can share and has shared it with me, and it intrigues me because our marketplace is so different. But I would rely on him to be able to provide that data back to us. And Advanced Travel has some of those components as well and provides that information. And then that allows us to make our decisions based in our sales plan, or in our marketing strategy, or in our sports strategy, actually. It also helps us in our content development. It helps us decide the stories we're doing. And so it actually takes a team of folks who may not be in this building each and every day to kind of go through the data to identify what's working, what's not. And for us, we rely on great partners. And so not only do we have to trust, we have to push and pull. And I think the folks that we do business with would know that that's probably what I would be accused of from time to time, is the push and pull on the numbers. But it takes good partnerships for small DMOs, and large DMOs too. But for DMOs to really succeed, we have to have great partners. We are driven by a little bit of a fear from a small DMO. I don't want to be the president and CEO of a DMO that kind of was the weak link in the chain of DMOs. I want to be able to carry our water just as strong as everyone else can. In order for us to do that, we have to make very well-informed decisions. We have to be good stewards of the public money. We have to be transparent when possible and at all times. And we want to be transparent in our data. And that data that comes from our partnerships has been so insightful for us to pass. So while I may hoard some of the data and keep it to myself on certain things for secret sauce work, I need to share that with our stakeholders so they too make good decisions in how they move forward. So we may not look at it in the same terms. We probably look at it from the same elevation that Dan and I do. But when it comes to implementation, we rely on a lot of partners outside the building to help us make good decisions.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a key nugget. Having good partners is a very important step along the way. There's so many different, partners that bring value to the table, and identifying who those partners are is so important for you DMO decision makers to always keep into consideration. Daniel, I wanted to ask you, I know you work with data and DMOs all the time, all over the place. Once you start working with the DMO, because of the data set that you actually represent, who do you find yourself mostly working with after a deal is in place, or maybe even in the process of setting up a new partnership?
It really is a great question. We have partners of all the different sizes, like you mentioned. From 2 to 25 type situations, or even more, depending on what that partner of ours is trying to achieve. That's really where it comes from. We have some people who say, we just want to know where the units are. There are some partners then who say, hey, we want to know how occupied they are. And then there's some that get really passionate about where the guests are coming from. And so that really depends. But I would say that the majority of DMOs, it really goes straight to a marketing director. Hopefully a DMO really has a marketing director on staff. A lot of those jobs have been vacant for a lot of this year, which was sort of interesting to me for the smaller DMOs. The other people that we work with, obviously on the property manager side, on the actual lodger side, we get a lot of people who use it for, business development. So bringing on new properties, which you wouldn't think has much impact on the destination side. However, that is what grows revenue for the destination, is having more properties coming into a property manager's offering. So having more properties generates more money for DMOs. And so that's something that certainly helps you all. On the DMO side, the other people who really benefit from it is anybody who does communications for stakeholders. So a lot of people are using it to communicate to the local business community when they're going to have peaks and valleys during the week, so that they can staff up properly. So those types of positions is the other piece that's really, really popular to use our data. Even the police department, knowing when and where to be when there's a lot of people in a specific area can be extremely valuable as well. And so that's another big stakeholder that gets access to our data, usually depending on the market.
Yeah, I mean, and that's great because all of those elements impact user experience when they get to the destination. So again, think of all the different things that we just identified that can come out of a data set, from informing police officers to our partners on how to properly staff up for a heavy weekend, perhaps, to driving marketing decisions long term. Rob, I want to circle back with you real quick. Key Data, is a relatively new partner in this universe of being able to aggregate and coordinate and efficiently categorize data in a meaningful way. With all the new data out there, a la polls to Key Data to other elements out there, what's the most newest set of data that you've been recently using to guide your decisions? Is there something new out there that you've been using?
Well, I mentioned earlier about the poll data just being used in the moment, just because things kind of changing right now. It fits kind of what we're looking for. Some of the stuff that Daniel has shared with us in Beaufort, and as we've gone through our process and the forecasting and kind of the point of origin is very important. We like to assume, and by nature, but that doesn't always work out in marketing very well. And you want to make sure that that assumption is, rooted in some hard facts if you can do it at best. And I would implore, smaller DMOs to really find the data set that works, that is needed for what your destination is doing at that time. What's the most important information you could pass along to them? So for us, hoteliers are looking for referrals. They are looking for, heads and beds in that driver. And that is the data set for us, working with our booking engine team and working with our placement partners and putting in ads in there and making sure that our the advertising that we're doing, the marketing in general that we're doing, whether it be content development or whatever, is meeting the visitor somewhere in that buying path. And that is something that we are trying to become more sophisticated in, so we can meet them when they're ready. So Jackie mentioned the polling ads. Are you looking to travel in 2 months, 3 months, 6 months? When is that? And then how do we stay engaged with you until that decision-making process, until we see you, here in Beaufort or out at Fripp Island enjoying the water? Where do we meet you in that? So that information for us has been very valuable right now. It's very important. As booking windows start to grow out a little bit more, I think if that data is going to be more important for us to implement on a routine basis. Right now, with the windows being a little shorter in decision making, we want to be nimble. And if risk is involved, take a little risk, but make sure it's rooted in some data that backs it up a little bit, and take that shot. We thought that we had a hot lead from Nashville, Tennessee. Turns out Nashville, Tennessee was not a big place for Beaufort, South Carolina, but Chicago seems to be. And so is some of the Midwest cities that we were not targeting at the time. We wouldn't have been able to find that out just by looking at our analytics on the back end of the website. We started looking for information that was shared to us for some very key partners, and be able to implement some strategies to meet them in the buying cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. Jackie, you know, talking about, you know, Dan, you kind of mentioned a little bit about the engagement element and how important it was. Rob, you've talked about polling ads and important that engagement metric is, you know, and with the concern of cookies being, you know, obsolete and not leveraged, one thing that a lot of people are looking at is how do we build our own database? How do we own our own operating, our own database and our own audience? Jackie, a lot of our DMO partners do look to build their own database. What are some ways that you've seen people build their database, and how have they used that once it's built?
Yeah, so I'll speak to one thing we've done recently with Rob and his team with Beaufort, and we formed a partnership with the brand. It's Southern Thing, very popular on social channels, YouTube. And we actually, instead of just a standard contest to generate leads and grow the database, we did a fun quiz. So we were asking people to, you know, what's your coastal itinerary? It'd have a question like, do you prefer the beach or a stroll downtown or something? And then you'd get, you know, here's these 10 places you can go to in Beaufort. So it was not only a way to learn about the audience, but we gained a lead, and it also gives us ideas for future partnerships and, you know, what the messaging looks like to those particular users moving forward. As they put it into their database, they are going to segment it so we can see what is the engagement when they are sending out e-blast. We then take their database. Another thing that I think is really cool, we have a lookalike audience, and I know I'm talking a lot about social. I want to circle back to some other things in a second too, but we use that database within social platforms as well to find lookalike audiences. So we're targeting the database audience plus people that look like them. And both of those give us different results. Circling back to like a new way or new data set to look at that we think is really valuable within paid search, with your conversions, you can now add conversion values. So an estimated return, right? It's not an exact ROI, but it's an estimated return on investment for what you're doing within the paid search realm, which is where people are looking for you. And adding a conversion value to that is something we're implementing with a few clients to learn more about who is converting the most, where are they coming from, and adding dollars to that within that particular platform. So not only are you getting, you know, different conversion metrics from other tactics like social and using that lookalike audience, but you're getting it within paid search too.
Yeah, Jackie, I'm going to stay on you for just a second, guys. And we're coming down to the last 10 minutes of our conversation. And I've got several more questions. Shocker. So I'm going to go a little fast through some of these. So if you can, guys, be kind of concise with your answers and let's move through them pretty quickly. But Jackie, I want to stay on you for a second. You review and analyze campaign metrics all the time. As you guide these metrics, what helps you understand whether to stay on the course or change courses and maybe go in a different direction?
So, you know, I think it's something that you had brought up at the very beginning of this is it's never just one piece of information, right? It's looking at multiple pieces that make sense together. So if, you know, we're talking about messaging, not only are we looking at the poll ads, we're looking at what's happening with the video and what's happening with display ads, and are those resonating? We don't just look at click-through rates. Like that is, I'm not a fan of CTR as a metric to follow. You're looking much further, as in, are they converting? What are your conversions? You have engagement conversions like 2+ minutes on the site, and you have form fill conversions. So we're looking at who's doing that, what age groups, what tactic is driving that. You know, what markets are driving the most outbound partner referrals, which is, you know, something we track with our clients. You know, those are the types of things we look at. It's a multitude of things that you look at to formulate what your next step is. It's never just, oh, we see a rise in occupancy from this one market. Well, then you look at 3 other places that you have data on to say, is that actually happening? Like to Rob's point about Nashville, we did a campaign there. We had some good engagement, but like nothing was happening from any other standpoint other than a solid click-through rate. That's not enough to say that's our market to go after. That's our, you know, that's where our audience is.
Yeah, it's interesting. Daniel, I'm going to pop to you for a quick second. You know, we just talked about a lot of micro metrics that we monitor. But when it comes to measuring more macro measurements, most people use, for KPIs like occupancy rate, ADR, RevPAR, how, to determine how successful they've been. What are some other KPIs that you might use that might not be as common from that perspective?
Sure. I think the biggest ones that are happening right now are things like average length of stay, average booking window. Those are metrics that if you can't see them, then good luck measuring them, right? Like they're hard metrics to get. But if you do have access to them, and if you have a vacation rental market, you at least have access to that. You can go out and find what is that average booking window really looking like? How much are people spending per trip? These are things that can kind of push that envelope, especially, the biggest thing that we hear on a regular basis is, oh, I'm at 90% occupied. I don't need any more information than that. Well, I think that's a really short-sighted answer, because when you start to say, okay, well, how do we make sure that occupancy turns into more dollars? How do we make sure that we're training our visitor that's going to probably come back to stay longer, to do more things and invest more in our community? So those are things that I think are key metrics that people should be paying more attention to.
Yeah, I think that's so smart. And I do think, just listening to Jackie and Daniel, there are macro and micro moments along the way that we need to pay attention to, which is why we want you to review lots of different metrics. Campaign metrics, database metrics, Google Analytics, aggregator opportunities like what Key Data and others bring to the table. So I've got 3 questions I'm going to run through. Dan, I'm going to start with you real quick. What's your most go-to data set that you look at every day?
All right, I've said this before, so I'm going to answer it and then go to a new one. Key data is what I look at every single day. The newest one that is most important to me is Uber Media, in terms of showing how visitors engage within the market. If you want to see this in real time, Google the New York Times model on where the people who attacked the Capitol on January 6th, how they move throughout the day. And it is fascinating to watch that action. And we can do it on the destination side. We can see where visitors go to at different times of the day, where they're coming from in terms of their origin markets and how they're getting here. Really important as we look, again, to make sure that we're balancing the tourism industry with the local residents.
Yep. Rob, what about you? What's your go-to data set that you look at every day?
It's going to be, I'm going to go to Google. I'm going to look at Google Trends. I'm just going to Google Buford SD and see where things go. I'm going to check our Google Analytics. I also check our up-to-date booking engine for those 3 things, just to get an idea of what that time looks like as far as.
Yep, absolutely. Let's stay on you for just a hot second. Dan, you mentioned this early in your conversation, so I want to ask Rob first. You said, you're not really looking at year-over-year comparisons. So what do you look at? What is the most interesting thing you found, and what do you look at from a year-over-year or 2-year-over-2-year perspective?
But it's definitely not going to be year over year with the pandemic versus what we're experiencing now, but definitely year over year when it comes to 2019, just from a recovery model. Like, we heard early on this going to be 2022, 2023 before you get to your full recovery, right? Well, in a smaller destination like Beaufort, where we're not having to fill up convention space, right? We're not having to work on that, but we have some small meetings. We're trying to figure out where we are, where we're lagging behind. And so Daniel made a comment about average length of stay. And I'll share this real quick. Hotels focus on their own occupancy and their own budgeting and their own numbers. What they miss is how others are performing in the same market, therefore driving ADR rates, compression, demand. That's where we come in to help facilitate that conversation and having good data available. So we try to match, kind of fill in the gaps for them in that case.
Dan, what about you? What do you frequently compare?
Well, for us, it's real difficult because right before the pandemic in October of 2018, we had a Cat 5 hurricane, which for Panama City Beach created a false economy that we hope will never repeat. So our our comparisons year over year have to go back a couple of years. And then you get to the point where at some level, it just becomes just watered down. It's something to say, but it really doesn't mean that much. And so what we're really starting to focus on is how are we doing today and what is our engagement today? So it's focused on from here going forward. And we saw this after the oil spill where we had to change our point of view. And so it's really just saying, okay, we're doing all right, but how can we do better?
Yep, absolutely. The future of data is going to be very interesting to watch how it evolves over time. Guys, we've kind of come to the end of our hour. I want to be respectful of your time and of our audience's time. So let me give a quick plug. I hope through this conversation, you guys saw that there's not one data set that is the only data set you should be watching. You should be watching all types of data insights that you can get on your destination and visitors that are visiting. So I hope that you take the time to work with your partners, work with your internal teams to comb through the data that you have, pull those insights out, review them collectively, and make the best decisions that you can for your destination, for the future of your destination, and for your current moment of your destination. Let me thank you, Jackie, Daniel, Dan, Rob. Thank you so much for joining us. Will, Becca, and Connect Travel, thank you guys for setting this platform up for us. I hope, and let me thank all of our viewers for joining us and taking the time out of your day to listen to us tell you some of our insights and information. And I hope that you will all join us face-to-face in September at the eTourism in Las Vegas. It's going to be exciting. This video and conversation will be recorded. It will be on eTourism's website as well as our Advanced Travel and website, and probably yours too, Daniel. So thank you for your time. I hope you'll have a wonderful week and talk to you all soon.